In 1695, one man pulled off the most daring heist in pirate history, vanishing with a fortune so vast it rivaled the wealth of kings. This is the story of Henry Every, the elusive pirate who looted the world's richest treasure ship and was never caught. Henry Every was a seasoned sailor, but he was a man with bigger dreams than toiling away under the lash of the Navy or slaving for some merchant company. No, Every had ambition. Ambition enough to seize his destiny with both hands. At the time, he was serving as first mate aboard a ship called the Charles II, a vessel employed by the Spanish to hunt treasure in the Caribbean. But the men aboard were fed up. The Spanish pay was slow. Conditions were brutal, and the officers were as cruel as the sun was hot. Every, sharp as a cutlass and twice as dangerous, saw an opportunity. One fateful night off the coast of La Coruña, Spain, with the officers asleep and the ship quiet under the moonlight, Every made his move. He and a group of loyal men crept below decks, waking the crew with whispers of rebellion. And oh, how the men listened. Here was a chance to escape their misery, to strike out as free men, to become rich beyond their wildest dreams. It was all the encouragement they needed. Every and his men stormed the captain's quarters. The captain, startled from his sleep, found himself staring down the business end of a pistol before he could utter a word. The officers were rounded up, bound, and put ashore with nothing but a longboat and the clothes on their backs. With that, the ship was theirs. But Every knew that a new life needed a new name. No longer would they sail under a king's banner. From that night forward, the Charles II became the Fancy. Imagine the Fancy, sleek and swift, cutting through the warm waters of the Atlantic, her white sails billowing in the wind. Henry Every and his crew, now full-fledged pirates, were headed for a land that had become a pirate's paradise, Madagascar. Why Madagascar? By the late 17th century, Madagascar was a notorious haven for pirates. Its remote location, plentiful resources, and friendly local rulers made it an ideal hideout. European traders often stopped here, and many abandoned sailors and deserters from merchant navies found refuge on its shores. Some had even gone fully native, living with local tribes, marrying Malagasy women, and forming small pirate settlements. Every knew that if he wanted to pull off something truly legendary, he needed more men. The Fancy was a fine ship, but she alone wouldn't be enough for the grand ambition he had in mind. In Madagascar, the Fancy arrived in a pirate stronghold, likely Ile Sainte-Marie, an island just off the coast that served as a well-known base for outlaws. Here, Every began recruiting. He offered a simple yet irresistible pitch to any rogue, deserter, or freebooter willing to listen. No kings, no masters, only fortune and freedom. A chance to join the richest plunder in history. A ship fast enough to outrun any navy. Word spread fast. Every's charisma and reputation as a capable leader drew pirates from all corners of Madagascar. Some were former English and Dutch privateers who had grown tired of government contracts. Others were ex-slavers, Arab smugglers, and rogue sailors looking for a new cause. But Madagascar was just the first step. Every had his eyes on the biggest prize in the world, the Red Sea trade routes, where the richest ships of the Mughal Empire sailed. And to take them down, he needed more ships. Sailing north from Madagascar, the Fancy roamed the Indian Ocean, where Every and his men formed alliances with other pirate crews. By mid-1695, he had amassed a formidable squadron of 6 ships. Thomas Tew, a famous Rhode Island pirate, captaining the Amity. Tew had already struck it rich, raiding Mughal ships, and was eager for another score. Richard Want, a lesser-known but deadly pirate who commanded the Dolphin. Joseph Farrow and William May, captains of smaller vessels that swore loyalty to Every's plan. Other pirate captains, their names lost to history, but they were drawn by the promise of riches beyond their wildest dreams. With this fleet of 6, Every wasn't just a pirate anymore. He was a pirate admiral. In 1695, Every and his fleet set their sights on the Bab el-Mandeb Strait, a narrow passage at the mouth of the Red Sea, between the Arabian Peninsula and the Horn of Africa. Here, the Mughal treasure ships, laden with gold, silver, and jewels, passed on their way back from Mecca. It was a choke point all Mughal treasure ships had to take as they returned from Mecca on their way back to India. Every and his men weren't here for just any prize. They were after the richest ship in the Indian Ocean, the Ganji Sawai, a Mughal flagship belonging to Emperor Aurangzeb, one of the most powerful rulers in the world. This wasn't just a ship. It was an armed fortress, bristling with guns, soldiers, and slaves, carrying an enormous fortune in gold, silver, and jewels. It was also carrying something even more valuable, the personal harem of the emperor himself, including noble women, concubines, and high-ranking passengers. Every's pirate fleet lay in wait. Days passed. Then, on the horizon, they spotted their prey. The Ganji Sawai, a massive Mughal treasure ship, heavily armed, carrying hundreds of elite Mughal soldiers. The Fateh Muhammad, an escort ship, smaller but still carrying valuables and warriors. Every ordered an immediate pursuit. The Fancy, having been modified since its new ownership, stripped of excess weight to focus on speed, was faster than any ship in the Mughal fleet. And so, the chase began. The first to fall was Fateh Muhammad. Every's fleet swarmed it, cannons roared, and the outgunned escort surrendered without much of a fight. The pirates looted the ship and found a small fortune in gold and silver. But this was just the appetizer. Now it was time for the Ganji Sawai. The Ganji Sawai was one of the largest and most powerful ships in the Indian Ocean, carrying up to 40 cannons and hundreds of soldiers. For a moment, it seemed the pirates had bitten off more than they could chew. But then, a stroke of pure luck. Luck of the devil, perhaps. As the 2 ships closed in, one of the Ganji Sawai's cannons exploded, killing its own gunners and throwing the ship into chaos. Seeing his chance, Every ordered a full-scale assault. The Fancy's cannons fired broadside after broadside, smashing into the Mughal ship's hull. Pirates armed with muskets and grenades boarded the enemy deck. Mughal soldiers fought back fiercely, but the pirates were ruthless, swarming the ship like a tide of death. The battle raged for hours, but eventually the Mughal defenders were overwhelmed. When the smoke cleared, the Ganji Sawai belonged to Every and his men, and the treasure was beyond their wildest dreams. The pirates had just stolen an estimated 600,000 to 800,000 pounds in gold, silver, and jewels, an astronomical sum at the time. To put it in perspective, this was more than the annual revenue of the entire English government and worth hundreds of millions in today's money. This was the heist of the century. Every's men had just become the richest pirates in history. But there was a darker side to the raid. The brutality of the raid naturally extended to the Mughal Empire's slaves and noblewomen, including many of the Mughals' emperor's harem. Many were taken as prisoners and would never find their way home. The Mughal men who surrendered were tortured and executed. Survivors were left behind on the wrecked ship, stranded and helpless. The raid was so brutal that when news reached Emperor Aurangzeb, he was enraged beyond words. The Mughal Empire was one of the most powerful nations in the world, and now its honor had been humiliated by pirates. Aurangzeb demanded revenge, and soon the full force of both the Mughal Empire and the English crown would be hunting Henry every down. The pirates sailed to Reunion Island, or possibly the Comoros, to divide their staggering treasure. Henry himself is believed to have taken the lion's share, possibly around 150,000 pounds. Each of his crew walked away a millionaire by the standards of the time, making them some of the richest men in the world. But their wealth made them wanted men. With Mughal warships, the English Royal Navy, and even the East India Company hunting them down, every knew that staying together would be suicide. So the pirates scattered. Some went to Madagascar, the known pirate haven. Others returned to the West Indies, blending in as merchants. Many changed names and disappeared into history. As for Every, he had a different plan. In early 1696, Every set sail for the Caribbean, hoping to retire quietly. He first landed in the Bahamas, where he bribed the corrupt governor Nicholas Trott to let him dock and sell off the Fancy. But the world was already closing in on him. England declared him public enemy number one, initially putting a bounty of £500, but doubling to £1,000 with pressure from the Mughal Empire. £1,000 in the 17th century had the same purchasing power as £3 million today. He was wanted across Europe, Africa, the Americas, and Asia, making him the first person in history to have a global manhunt against him. The Mughal Empire demanded justice, putting immense pressure on the East India Company and British government. So much so that Emperor Aurangzeb threatened to expel all British merchants from India, arrested British officials in Surat, and seized East India Company factories as punishment. The British East India Company, EIC, relied on Mughal permission to trade in India. Had Aurangzeb followed through on these threats, it could have escalated to war. Many of Every's crew were arrested and hanged, but Every himself had vanished. Theories about his fate vary. Some say he slipped back to England or Ireland, living under an assumed name. One legend suggests he was cheated out of his riches and died penniless in England. Other stories claim he ruled over a hidden pirate kingdom, living in luxury. No one knows for certain. Henry Every was never seen again. Every became a legend, a ghost, a myth, remembered as one of the few pirates who got away with it. No confirmed capture, no execution. His story inspired countless pirates who followed, from Blackbeard to Bartholomew Roberts. His heist of the Ganges Sawai remains one of the most audacious and lucrative pirate raids in history. Some called him a hero of the sea, a man who defied empires. Others saw him as a butcher and a criminal whose actions brought conflict and suffering. Whatever the truth, Henry, Every vanished, perhaps leaving behind treasure and terror in equal measure. But most of all, he left behind a legend, the legend of a pirate king.